let me do the second half of that first. On the second half of the question, I should say that although I have a role in that in my new task with ISAF and NATO, of course, in the end, we're all operating under a UN mandate in Afghanistan, and the leadership of the international community really sits with the UN. So I don't want to overestimate my own importance, although I'm sure I'll find an excuse to do so at some stage. The real issue, of course, is about the coordination made by the Afghan government, and that has also improved, but I think that's something on which we need to work very closely over the next year. In terms of the first half of your question, about this military-civil balance and the overlap between the two, in a sense, it's not about reassuring civil society about whether the civilian effort is in some sense being tarnished by its association with the military effort, because the constituency that matters is not us and it's not civil society, it's the Afghan population and whether we're really delivering for them. And I think we have to look at Afghanistan. One can oversimplify and one can overcomplicate, but broadly speaking, there are really two zones in Afghanistan: the south and east. The priority is stabilising those. They're facing a serious conflict. They're facing deteriorating security. There isn't still massive support for the Taliban. Even in those areas, it's probably about a quarter, nothing much more than that, less than 10% countrywide. But in those areas, the priority is stabilisation, and therefore the civilian effort, the development effort, the civil effect, if you like, needs to focus on that, delivering the immediate benefits that people need to see from their government to actually believe they have a government that is worth supporting. And that, as I was saying earlier, means competing head-on with the insurgency and the shadow governments that Nick was talking about in terms of security and justice, being as quick, fairer, as clean as the motorcycle courts that the Taliban set up in justice. And I think meshing together traditional justice and traditional village shuras that deal with disputes into the formal justice system is a huge challenge for us, but a really important one, and we mustn't try and impose a Western system of justice on that society. Security is obvious. And then jobs and development, and those may be jobs in very simple development projects of the kind that I mentioned earlier, the National Solidarity Programme. If you look at the north and west of the country, although there are still security issues there and pockets of insurgency, if we can get the whole country to the stage that those are in, while the insurgency won't be over, we will have succeeded. Because we'll no longer have an insurgency that threatens the fundamental integrity of the Afghan state, which is what we're facing right now. If we have Kunduzes and places like that all over the country, they will be very unpleasant to be in. They'll be very threatening. There'll be terrorist incidents. But in the end, the integrity of the Afghan state will be assured. And in the north and west, therefore, we're dealing, in a sense, with Afghanistan as a poor country rather than a conflict-ridden country. Now, that's an oversimplification, but you'll get the distinction I'm drawing. And there, I think we can see more classic development aid that is designed to address poverty and all of the social issues that go with poverty that, in a sense, are common to many poor countries at the same stage of development as Afghanistan. But in the south and east, the priority, in my view, over the next 18 months or so is stabilisation, because we can't deal with poverty until we've reduced the conflict. And I think all of us, military and civil, need to share that agenda and see ourselves as partners rather than worrying about one side or the other having a particular profile. And of course, one can turn the question around and think about the military criticism of the civilians as well. I think we've got to do that in partnership, particularly in the south and east.
Gentleman here, Ms. Lady here, Ms. Lady there afterwards.
Michael Griffin, interested observer. I know you never like to comment on leaked documents, but the publication in the New York Times today of Carl Eikenberry's comments, cautionary notes to Mrs. Clinton about the proposed surge which will take place this year will certainly have rung a few bells. My first question is, does that indicate a very, very deep level of resistance within the US bureaucracy, particularly the State Department, if you like, to the proposed surge? The second question is, Among his comments is he notes the fact that there is a lack of leadership among the 44 countries in their civilian efforts, and he proposes that America becomes the lead player in that area. Do you think you're going to have a sufficiently large budget from these 44 member states to actually make a lot of difference, or are you going to end up a little bit like Tony Blair in Jerusalem?
Let's hope not.
I can't decide whether to be flattered or not by the comparison. I must admit, I've never put myself in his league or indeed in any sphere. I mean, on the first point, I haven't seen the New York Times story, so I'm sort of commenting. I'm familiar with essentially some of the background, but I'm not familiar with the exact story. But I'm assuming this was something that Karl Eikenberry sent in during the autumn, when there was this intense debate within the administration about which way to go. I mean, the fact is there was an intense debate within the administration. Quite a lot of it played out, semi-publicly in Washington, as often is the case. Although I have to say, I think this administration has been a lot more disciplined than, for example, its immediate predecessor. Probably its two immediate predecessors about that. But there was an intense debate about, was this the right strategy? Was the surge the right thing to do? Was pressing on with essentially what General McChrystal's approach is, which is his innovation is not, in a sense, to have come up with a new approach. It's to have said, we're really going to do counterinsurgency the way the Petraeus manual, the way that it's been done elsewhere. We're really going to do it properly for the first time, rather than compromising it or pursuing a more kinetic form of military approach, as had been done in the past. So in a sense, it's really meaning it's the intensification of that. There was a real, very live debate in Washington as to whether that was the right thing to do, whether they should put in more forces, whether they should go for what was seen as an alternative, essentially characterised as a counter-terrorism strategy. In other words, a much lighter touch with attacks or punitive attacks if terrorist facilities grew up. And they worked all that through. And I think Karl Eikenberry, I know I see him all the time, played an active role in that debate, and it was absolutely right for him as ambassador to be going in and saying, right, we need to think about the alternatives, and we need to consider, is a surge in forces the right thing to do, and is the timing of that surge the right thing to do? Absolutely the right, absolutely his job as ambassador. And if we were doing the same thing in this country, I would be sending in similar kinds of cables, saying, okay, that's the military recommendation. Here are the alternatives. Let's just essentially test that recommendation to destruction. I think Karl would do that.
Second question.
On the second half, my job is not to build an empire and spend the next year trying to aggregate to myself or indeed arrogate to myself all of the civilian resources and then direct them. That's not the way it should work. And of course, what you would do, even if that were a desirable objective, personally I don't think it is, because I think you lose energy rather than gain it from people. But even if it were desirable, you'd spend a year or 18 months just fighting bureaucratic battles over who signed which check and all the rest of it. I think my job is to try and generate greater coherence, to leverage all of the national resources that are there, and try and create unity of effort rather than unity of command. Identify where the gaps are, identify the crucial things that need to be delivered in those provinces afflicted by conflict, and in the district in particular at that level, which has been neglected, afflicted by conflict, and what are the key changes that we can make. And therefore, in the West, what should I be trying to persuade the Italian government and the Italian ambassador to focus their resources on? What should I be persuading the American ambassador to focus his resources on, etc. And that is, I think, what my job is. So it's, in essence, if it's leadership from the back seat. It's backseat driving rather than trying to control everything myself. And that's the basis on which I do it.